Shalom Aleichem, everyone, as the Farbrengen turns back here to the North America and our shores. In just a moment, we're going to see a promotion for the One Mitzvah campaign. And I want to encourage everyone to take the opportunity to click on the link and to open up
Okay, המיקרופון פתוח אצלך.
Okay, are we ready? Can you hear me? יכולים לשמוע?
כן, שומעים.
Okay. So Shalom Aleichem, everyone, as the Farbrengen returns to the shores of North America and this side of the world. Yashikayach to all the Shluchim, Tmimim, and Anash in Eretz Yisrael and Eretz HaKodesh. In a moment, we're going to see a promotion for the One Mitzvah campaign that Rav Moshe Katarsky spoke about, and that is the Hachlata of this Farbrengen of Kayach Nissen. So at this time, I want to encourage everyone not just to watch the promotion, but to actually click on the link and to see how easy it is to establish your own account and how simple it is to simply send an invitation to other people. It follows in the same format of a charity campaign that we're familiar with from fundraising efforts. You simply send a link to others and you don't even have to do the work. The system does the work for you and mitzvahs come in Mirz Hashem to bring us directly to Moshiach. Yashikayach. The link is available right under your live stream. It's also available every so often in the chat box, and you can take a look. At this time, we're going to have the schus of hearing from a mashpia who is in the yeshiva in Toronto, the Lubavitcher Yeshiva, by us here. I'm also living here in Ontario. And I wanted to first mention that in the Chassidische Parsha this week, we learned that in the bracha, the birchas hamitzvahs, we see Baruch Atah Havaya, then it says Elokeinu Melech Haolam. The Alter Rebbe asks a simple question. Either it could say Elokeinu Malkeinu, or it could say Elika Melech. What's up with Elokeinu and then Melech Haolam? So the Alter Rebbe explains that in order for the Eibishter to be Melech Haolam, first he needs to be Elokeinu of Am Yisrael, because Yidden are the pnimius of the Welt. And how do we make the Eibishter Elokeinu? Through Limud HaTorah. So we now have the opportunity to hear from the Rosh Yeshiva of the Yeshiva in Toronto, the Lubavitcher Yeshiva in Toronto, and Kana Mokim also, that all of us should raise our glasses and make a l'chaim, as Chassidische Farbrengen kenufton, ken afilu malach michol nishtufton, ad the Eibishter will give a Bakiva Gershon ben Ochel Basia, refuah shlemo krevu mehera, l'chaim l'chaim.
Amen. Yashikeach. L'chaim u'lebracha. After just hearing the words of the Rebbe that were played on the recording, that the Rebbe spoke how even when 10 Yidden gathered together is a davar she'einei muvan klal, that at such an event and after such an occasion Mashiach shouldn't come. So how much more so when we're gathered globally, b'chol ha'elam kulei, b'chol katzvei tevel, and Yidden are gathered with the sole objective of tut alts to do whatever we can to bring Mashiach, is how much more so is it unfathomable that such an event shouldn't bring the Gula Amitis Vashlema B'Peil Mamish. So I was sure that with such an event will for sure bring the anticipated results, that before I should have to speak, and it would be B'Meila Gula Pratis as well. And so this is a davar she'einei muvan klal u'klal. Akopanim, l'chaim u'lebracha, should be a kapanim now. The gathering should be pale pulasei. The main thing that should bring this eirus by all the mishtatzvim, esvayduyis peilos, like the Rebbe always spoke, to bring to pale mamish, to actually bring the geula. There's a machlekes in Gemara about tshuva or atzadik gomer, who is greater. One man, the Omer says that atzadik gomer is greater than about tshuva. But Rabbi Vol says, "B'mokim shabal tshuva emdim tzadikim gemurim einam yechelim lamed sham." That Rabbi tshuva is greater, surpasses atzadik gomer. The Rambam paskins that Rabbi tshuva is greater than atzadik gomer. B'mokim shabal tshuva emdim ein tzadikim gemurim yechelim lamed sham. And the Rogat Shaver says, what's the mucker of the Rambam? If it's a machlekes in Gemara, why does the Rambam choose this opinion? It says the mucker is a Gemara in Kiddushin that says, "Amekadesh as Isha al Minas shani tzadik, afilu rasha gomer mekudash as shema hira tshuva belibe." L'chayra, even if he was here tshuva belibe, he's only about tshuva. He said al Minas shani tzadik. If a tzadik is greater than about tshuva, it still should not be a good Kiddushin. Says the Rogat Shaver, from here is the mucker of the Rambam that about tshuva, that the halacha is like the Mandomer who says mokim shabal tshuva emdim ein sadikim gemurim yechelim lamed sham, that about tshuva is greater than a tzadik. The Rebbe asks on this two questions in a letter to Rabbi Zevin, who quotes this Rogat Shaver. The Rebbe asks one question, that the din by kiddushin is even hita l'shvach. Even if he said something that he's greater than what he really is, not only if he's worse than what his condition was, but even if he's greater than what his condition was, it's still not a good kiddushin. So even if Abal Tshuva would be greater than a tzaddik, it still shouldn't be a good enough kiddushin. And then the Rebbe asks another question, that even like the Mandamer who says that Makim Shabal Tshuva im Demein Tzadikim Gemurim Yechelim Lamed Sham, that about Tshuva is greater than a tzaddik, that's with regards to Schar V'Einish. But there's still a chisarin in a Tshuva compared to a tzaddik, and the fact that about Tshuva is Surei Ra, which means he has negative characteristics, he has negative traits. He's drawn to bad, he's pulled to bad. And therefore, since he has that negative aspect, it still shouldn't be a good kiddushin. And because of that, in the letter, which is printed in a few places, the Rebbe rejects the Rogat Shaver. But in Likutei Sichos, that many people learned this week, Chelik Yud Zayin, in the project Likutei Sichos, the Rebbe only brings the first question, and the Rebbe answers that there's two different levels in Tshuva Me'ava. There's a level in Tshuva Me'ava in which he's greater than a tzaddik, and there's a level in Tshuva Me'ava which he becomes the equivalent of a tzaddik. So the question is, but what about the other question? Saf kal saf, even if the Baal Tshuva is equivalent or greater than a tzaddik, but he still has the chisarin, that surei ra, that he has negative characteristics, that he's drawn to bad, like it says in various places. So the kiddushin should still not be a good kiddushin, which, how could the Rebbe say the answer and seemingly disregard the other question? And possibly the answer is, in this Sikha, the Rebbe is differentiating between Tshuva Me'ira and Tshuva Me'ava. Tshuva Me'ava, a Tshuva that stems from loving the Eibishter, from Atzimoin and a Tshuka, a thirst and a yearning for Elikos, automatically includes the fact that he's no longer Surei Ra, someone who loves godliness, someone who's drawn to godliness. We say, Oye ve'avaya sinura, someone who loves Elikos, someone who loves Eibishter. It follows, it's inevitable, it goes hand in hand, that he's no longer drawn to bad, he no longer is drawn after Taivas Elam Haza and after doing Avedas. And like it says in Tanya, in direct proportion with the love for Elikos, is the Miyus Bara, is the rejection and the repulsiveness of Inyani Elam Haza in general and Avedas specifically. And therefore, in this Sikha where the Rebbe says it's a Tshuva Me'ava and there's a level of Tshuva Me'ava that's equal to tzaddik, also it includes that Tshuva Me'ava doesn't either have the negative traits, the negative characteristics of being Surei Ra. When the Rebbe wants us to live Moshiach, to want Moshiach, to sincerely and genuinely yearn for Moshiach, Yearning for Mashiach is yearning for the ultimate gili of Elikos that comes when Mashiach comes, of Vero, Kol Basar, Yachtav, Kifiya, Vaya, Diber, that our physical flesh, our physical nature will relate with and understand and care about Elikos and see Elikos, V'nikla Kfeida Vaya. That's not separable from Mashiach. And therefore, living from Mashiach translates in our day-to-day life as meliknish and taivas elam haza, that we can't be as immersed in our enjoyments and our pleasures of worldly pleasures of averes chas v'shalom, because it's inseparable. Because because the mios is a direct proportion with the ava. And loving Mashiach, loving the Gili Elikos, and yearning for that ultimate Gili Elikos has to include hating something that's sonui, that's hated by the Eibishter. It says in the Rambam in Hilchas Malachim and Milchamisayim, Val Yarech Beinyane Hagadis. The Rambam says, don't focus on things that we know about Mashiach, and those the Rambam spells out for us. The Inyane Gula Mashiach, the Sugis of Mashiach, and the Halachis of Mashiach, and the details of what's exactly going to be the process of Geula. Besides that, says the Rambam, there's other Haggadis that are not clear, that we don't know, that are unknown. Al Yarech Beinyane Haggadis, don't spend time on those Haggadis that are things that are unknown to us. And the Rambam says, why not? Ki eina meviim lo yira v'lo ava. Because they don't bring a person to Yira and Avos Hashem. L'cheira, the person who's focusing on the Haggadis, on the Divrei Haggadah, on the Midrashei Chazal about Mashiach, is doing it to gain a better understanding about Mashiach, to be more aware of the world of Mashiach. So the Rambam should say, learning about those Haggadis that are not conclusive is not going to bring you closer to Mashiach, is not going to bring the Geula closer, which would seemingly be the objective of the person who's looking to do that. What's the Rambam saying? Al Yarech B'inyane Haggadis, because they don't bring to Yira v'Ava. Seemingly because the Kachem Mashiach is inseparable. You want Mashiach because you want Eibishter, and because you don't want something that's sunny, that's Heipech Ratzon Elyon, that's against the Ratzon of the Eibishter. One thing, Mashiach is inseparable from Yira v'Ava. The Rambam says something that Eine Mevi Yira v'Ava is automatically not connected with Mashiach, and therefore those Haggadis are not part of preparing and learning Mashiach. And therefore the Rebbe told us in this Sikha that we just heard, in the historical Sikha of Chavches Nissen, that after everything that was done, what's the problem that we have? What did the Rebbe in such Herzig Geverte complain to us? That after everything that was done all the years, we're still in Golus. Mashiach didn't come yet. We didn't have the Geula Mitzvah Shlema. Seemingly, that's enough. That's the problem. That's the complaint. That's why everything was insufficient, didn't suffice, didn't bring to the desired conclusion. But the Rebbe didn't finish with that. The Rebbe said startling words, seemingly. Was nachmer is nachalten a Golus Pnimi in Yanim von Avedas Hashem kemeduber kama pamim. I think those were the Rebbe's words. That not only are we still in Golus, not only is not only did Mashiach not come yet, but we're in a Golus Pnimi in Yanim of Avedas Hashem, because those two are inseparable. Because living with Mashiach has to go hand in hand with living, with appreciating our Ava V'Yira, our appreciation of godliness in each way that translates in our day-to-day life. And I'll emphasize, it's possible that someone should focus on Ava V'Yira. It's possible that someone should be a Chassidish Yid and daven barichos on Zayna Emes Chassidish Yid, but he's missing the main point of Mashiach, and Kach sich nicht Mashiach. That could be. But the other way can't be. To Kach sich Mashiach, the way the Rebbe wants us to Kach sich Mashiach, so the Rebbe spells it out for us. That means that we want, that we kassis, we're ganzen subtresel, we're broken because we want the ultimate Gilia Atzmos, the Gilia Lekos, the way it is when Mashiach comes. And therefore that has to translate in the way that we're living with Mashiach now, through familiarizing ourselves with the life of Moshiach and with the era of Moshiach in a way that's so important, so real to us, that other things become less appealing to us, less palatable to us. There's a story, a Polish Maisa, that there was one of the Polish Rebbes was known as the Triske Magid. He was the son of Untitled Chapter, and he was from the very Derhebener Rebbes in his time, many stories about him. And he was known specifically to be a Rebbe, kemenish liegen in Essen or in Schlafen. That's not the way to become a Rebbe. But he was known even amongst the Rebbes of his time, specifically that he was very, very much memayet in Achila and in Shema. He didn't eat and he didn't sleep. And once Rabbi Baruch Mezhebusher met him, the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, and he asked him, "For was esst du nicht and for was schlafst du nicht? Why do you eat and sleep so little?" So he said, "I don't eat because I'm too tired to eat, and I don't sleep because I'm too hungry to sleep." He was being deiche him bekash. Rabbi Baruch Mezhebusher was known that he he took a strong stance even with the other Rebbes, that they had to comply with him. He told them, I'm going to pull you out of both elements. So he told them, when I was a young child, 4 or 5 years old, my father, Untitled Chapter, once woke me up in the middle of the night. And he told me, Tizechan, get dressed. And he took me in the wagon and we drove, middle of the night. We drove into the middle of the forest. In the middle of the forest, we came to a hut. And my father got out of the wagon by the hut. And a man came out of the hut, a man with a white beard who had a face like a Malach Hashem Tzvakis. And I heard my father go speak to him. And they spoke for a few moments, and I heard my father say to him, "Is noch nicht great, das ist noch nicht die Zeit." And then my father got back in the wagon and we went back home. And I asked him my height. And he said to me, "You know that in every generation, there's one person who's Roi, Lias, Moshiach, who's the Moshiach of the generation." My father said to me, that person who had the face of the Malach Hashem Tzvakis, he was the Moshiach of the generation. And he asked me, is it time to come take the Eden out of goats? And I said to him, is noch nicht great, das ist noch nicht die Zeit. And the Triske Magid said to Baruch Mezhebusher, du was gehat hast, hat Tate. Du was gesehen, die Ponim von Moshiach, die Ponim von Malach Hashem Tzvakis. And you would hear, wie dein Tate sagt, Moshiach is noch nicht great. Und es ist noch nicht die Zeit. So, was du gekannt essen und was du gekannt schlafen. So the story has many strange things about it. But one point I think is very powerful and very meaningful to us in an opposite way, that living with Moshiach, and we also saw the face of Moshiach. We did see the face of Moshiach, but we saw the face of Moshiach telling us, "Wir sind yad great, und es ist yad Zeit." Und wir darf tun alles, was wir können, to bring it and be megalit, because the time can't go on anymore. So that has to translate by us that liegen in Moshiach, that we're involved and immersed and obsessed and preoccupied with bringing this Gula Mitzvah Shlema. Take it from Yad Mamish, like the Rebbe said, is in a way that we can't be involved in our eating and in our sleeping and in our Inyani Ha'ilam. I don't know about everyone else, but I still am very, very much immersed in my Taiva Selam Hazeh. I still love chocolate, I still love pizza and vasalasach. But the Rebbe told us that we're able to put it into practice, Mumata L'mayla. The Rebbe said, live with Moshiach Tayameh Chayim Zachu. Learning the Yanegula Moshiach is not a subject. It's bringing it into our consciousness. It's bringing it into our focus, into our awareness. To love in Moshiach, to bring that reality which is within reach, it's within touch. It's samoch v'nira. It's here. We can see it and we can touch it. To bring it so close that we could live the way we could imagine and know that we're going to live then. In davening, we say, "Reimin ma'iskeil b'greinam v'chera pipiyes biyada." Taich zechap chassidus. Reimin ma'iskeil b'greinam. When a person thinks about the reimin ma'iskeil, about the aloofness, about the greatness of the Eibishter. In your name, you think how we're going to be sitting in a few moments, and the Rebbe is sitting over here, and all the Rabbeim are going to be sitting here, and all the Tanaim and Ambeiraim and the Nevi'im and the Avis Aktation. And they're all going to be preoccupied with Teira Chadasha Meiti Teitze with Venig Vero Kobasa Yachtav Kifia Vayedimer. How embarrassing will it be, whatever we're into now? The Hechere Inyanim, the Denidrig Inyanim, Kol Echad Lefum Shira Delay. Like it says Taka and the Likutei Teira of next Shabbos of Emer, V'lei Nevish, V'lei Nikolim, Leilam Vay. Reimim Ma'iskeil B'Grein, I'm just thinking and focusing on the Reimim Ma'iskeil, on the aloofness, and that's Maimed Umatzev, that's right around the corner. Makes a cherev pipis biyadam, gives us a double-edged sword. Larek, to kill, to push away, and to separate ourselves from any possible attraction to something that we know is going to be shameful and embarrassing to us when we're in that Maimed Umatzev. Living with that world of Moshiach has to translate that we're living now in a way that reflects the fact that what we care about is this v'nigla kfei davaya, and like the Rebbe said, that we could have the biggest giluyim in Gashmias and the biggest giluyim in Ruchnias, and nevertheless, as Ayid Gansen Tresel, we're broken up, we're shattered to pieces because we don't have the Gili Shar Hanun, we don't have the Gili Atzmos, we don't have the ultimate Gili Elikos the way it's going to be. Take it from Yad Mamash when Moshiach comes. And this is something that could sound lofty. This is something that the Rebbe gives us, and every person can start it on his level. It starts Pashut learning a shir, but not learning another shir, learning it and thinking about it and living it. If the Rebbe tells us now is great to us the sight, if the Rebbe tells us now this is within reach, it's here, we could touch it, we could feel it, we could smell it, we could experience it. So we only have to do our part, and we have to bring ourselves into that mindset. And in that mindset, then automatically we're able to implement it, to cause that our way that we live, that our lifestyle reflects that. As and automatically, automatically, the Gili Elikos and the Aval Elikos includes as Melat nicht lieb und Melik nicht in andere Sachen. I want to give just two practical areas where we should be, I think, focusing on this, and we are able to focus on this. In one of the places where the Rebbe speaks so strongly and so powerfully about this, of course, like everyone knows, is the Maimer V'ata Tetzav. In the second half, especially, of the Maimer V'ata Tetzava, where the Rebbe speaks about the Kassis, which is the Kassis of our generation, whereas we have our Chava Begashmias, and there was our Chava Beruchnias, and nevertheless, nobody is satisfied. Chassidim go make these big events and Farbrengens, and they go around shlichus, and they do everything. Mis nicht ruhig, because it's negeya ultimate gilia lekos gilia atzmas the gula mitzvah fashlemo take it from me out mamish. And the Rebbe says there's this causes that the Rebbe says this surpasses the Mesiras Nefesh of the Yidden in Russia. This causes that even though you have harchava, it's not enough, and you're not satisfied because you need to have the gula b'peil mamish. Where is this expressed? Where do we show this? This that we care more about the ultimate gula than any harchava that we could possibly experience. So the Rebbe says, we're in the Maimon. The Rebbe says that's why every Yid says every day in davening, that then will be gilia lekos bis gilia atzis. Right? Everyone knows that. That's what it says in the Maimon. The Rebbe is not telling us that's what we're supposed to think when we say V'sachazenu Eineinu. The Rebbe says that is what is being meant and being said by every Yid who says V'sachazenu Eineinu dreimal atag, Yoser 3 or more times every single day. That's what he means. That's what he's expressing, this yearning, this unquenchable thirst for Moshiach that's near, that no matter what harchava you have, you're not satisfied without the Gula Mitzvah Shleim. And it's amazing. Not just Lubavitch Chassidim. The Rebbe says every year, David that says 3 times a Yeser a day, is expressing this kusses, this amazing tzitreselkeit of being broken and unsatisfied without the Gili of the Gula Mitzvah Shleima. That nothing matters, nothing else could give us satisfaction, not Gashmis, not Ruchnis. And of course, Veret in Yanim Chas V'Shalom V'Sumeira. How many of us are thinking about this when we say again, this is not something that the Rebbe is telling us to do. This is what the Rebbe is describing what's taking place. So this is what every Jew is already saying when he's saying what's left is hervas tuzatz. Listen, hear what we're already saying, because we're saying it. Because the Rebbe is proving from us saying it that that's what our kassis is, that that's the state that we're in. So take a few seconds when the Davish Renesser, like the Rebbe says, Shalish Pamim Bayim Oyeser, to hear Yishmu as Necham Ashepicha Medaben, to hear what we're saying, to hear the V'sachazana Eineinu B'shuf Cholitzim Berachmim, the way the Rebbe translates it and defines it, that this is this unquenchable thirst and yearning for Gili Alikus Bis Gili Atzmus. When we feel that, if we give ourselves a little bit of time, a little bit of focus, a little bit of attention to hear it, if we feel that thirst automatically, it overshadows anything else that we could want. But we have to hear it. Give a bissel sight, give a bissel cup in them. And if I may add, if I didn't go over time yet, we say in the end of davening.
No, Rabbi Kiva, you still have a minute.
Thank you. Okay, I'll make it fast. We never spoke about V'sachazena Einenu. Never spoke sometimes about a Semach David Avda Chamer Satzmiach. We say in the end of davening, an unbelievable yearning of Moshiach. V'al kein nekavel lecha avaya lekein liris meheira b'seferes uzecha lahaver gilula min haaretz l'sakin eila b'malch l'shin daled yud. The whole V'al kein is just an unequaled yearning for Moshiach. We're already then waiting for our breakfast, for our supper, for for the last Kaddish, taking off our tefillin. Take an extra few seconds, put yourself into the mindset. The Rebbe gave us the tools. Learn, understand that it's a real thing, understand what Moshiach is. Use those times that we're given, that we anyways are speaking about it and focusing on it. It should be a little bit more mitayetz, a bit more mitpnimius. This should come into our day-to-day life. And it should bring us right away on the bridge from the world of Golus into the world of the Gula Mitzvah Shleima. We shouldn't even have to wait till the end of the Farbrengen. With all our tanzen in the Gula, zusammen mit alle Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. Take it from me, Ad Mamish. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'bracha.
Amen. L'chaim, l'chaim, Rabbi Kiva. Tayed and Brida, dear brothers, we just had a little taste of what it's like in the yeshiva in Toronto. Thank you for bringing us in to the Hisaydidus, to the inspiration and to the passion that you carry with you, and that Kenai Nahara, you've had the schus for so many decades now to inspire all the Chassidim and the Tmimim that came through the yeshiva. With after the Geula, with the Geula, that you should continue to have the Gesund and the Kayach to inspire us all the way you have been until now. We're now going to have the schus to watch a little keta, a little portion from the Sicha of Daled Nisan Tafshin Mem Aleph, when we were all outside in that unforgettable moment saying Birchas Achama together with the Rebbe on Eastern Parkway in front of 770. And it'll be a portion where the Rebbe talks about how precious every single Yid is, every individual Yid.
A viele wenn ein und einzige Ried gefindt sich noch in Golus Ruchnis. Allahas kamme ve kamme wenn gefindt sich Echet in Golus Kepshuto. I das ha oni bakneses Israel, wo sie 40 und bei nicht spiegelt sich ob, wie das ist bei dem Eibischten, der aber zu jeder Rieden, Aderse soll nicht sein und in was für ein Maime du Matzebe soll nicht sein. A viele in Oni in alle Protein und durch den Ruf wird der Ringen Kiato Jehevani Ishi. Aber tut ich mit Asaminiden und mir macht von einem Ben Yochid la Kodesh Borchu Echet Begolui kommt Rob die Nisuim HaKodesh Baruch Hu in der Neifen von Jehevani Ishi Bechesed und Berachmim und Bekorev Mamosh und das wird in der Neifen von Rejuve die ganze Welt sieht, jeder Ried sieht man auf ihm, Bnei Yechide Shal HaKodesh Baruch Hu was Ben Yochid und noch näher wie der Baal Shem Tov tatscht das auf, ist doch verstandig. Aber der Vater Avinu Shabashamayim weiß, da ist die größte Avo, was Chavivus, was sie kennen sein.
The next chassid is going to Farbrengen with us. Doesn't require even an introduction. Rabbi Simon Jacobson was the chazed of the Rebbe for the last number of years that we had the schus to hear Farbrengens. And I don't know if I have the right to even suggest which of the years is the biggest schus, but the fact remains that Rabbi Simon brought to us the chazara of the Farbrengens and the Hanachas, the transcripts of the Farbrengens from the years Tavshin Nun, Nun Aleph, Nun Beis, all the years of the Psudas HaGeula. And when the Rebbe talks about being able to see in this keta of the video we just watched that every Jew is a Ben Yochid of the Eibishter, we saw that most dramatically in the Rebbe himself. The Rebbe clearly, as everyone could look at the Rebbe, see a Ben Yochid. And when you have someone who's called Kulei Rebbe, then that's someone that you want to listen to and learn from. So many years ago, Rabbi Simon Jacobson came to speak for Gimel Tammuz at an event in California, and I was there. And he told us a story about how when his first book came out, Toward a Meaningful Life, Wisdom of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he came to a small bookshop. He said somewhere in the Midwest. It's been many years. So Rabbi Jacobson, Reb Simon, if I got some details wrong, I'm sure you'll be able to correct me. He walked in for an event that was scheduled for the book that he had written. And when he said that I'm the author of the book, The Wisdom of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, she looked at him, she picked up the phone and called her manager in the back room and said, he's back, the Rebbe is back. A person who personifies the Rebbe, made it his life's mission to transmit the teachings of Chassidus and of the Rebbe in a language that's not only the language of the Safa Meduberes, the language of our country, but also in a way that is applied Chassidus, is a person with whom we want to Farbrengen. So we have the great schus, the great privilege of Farbrengen with Reb Simon Jacobson. Please unmute yourself, Simon.
Thank you very much. L'chaim to you, Rabbi Gurkov, l'chaim to all of our fellow Chassidim and to all of us who are participating in this mega event, and l'chaim yeshukayach to the organizers, my dear friend Shleiman Apastik and his entire team, and everyone at Merkaz 302, and all the extended people who made this happen. And thank you very much for that introduction. I just have to qualify one thing, if I may. She thought that I was Rabbi Schneerson, because it says the Rebbe's name prominently on the cover of the book, The Wisdom of the Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson. It took a little while for me to remind her that I was not Rabbi Schneerson. I was someone that worked for him. I just wanted to make sure that's clear. But there was no question that this was in Lexington, Kentucky, of all places, a place where you wouldn't think that Moshiach lives and Chassidus lives, and yet simple folk working in a bookstore, not Jewish, for them it was a given that that the Rebbe could be back, and that it's a given that the truth of the Rebbe's teachings and his ideas, which really is the truth of Teres Emes and Chassidus and Teres Achsidus, resonates and is a living reality in people's lives. So yes, indeed, I've seen this, and there's no question the Rebbe's words, though it doesn't need any confirmation, but I've seen it, personal witness, seeing time and again how these ideas that are not just ideas, but people live with it in a personal way, a taste of what will be when Mashiach comes, when people live with the teachings and the ideas and the directives and the guidelines of Torah. Now, I want to begin with a few feelings, if I may. I know that throughout the last almost close to 24 hours since after Shabbos, this has been a Farbrengen, a global Farbrengen, with literally hundreds of speakers, Farbrengers from all over the world in different languages, different time zones. And though I heard a few, but I can't say I heard most of them, I'm sure what was said was tremendous. But the first initial feeling I think is important to acknowledge, and I have no doubt that the Rebbe is listening to all of us, and of course the Eibishter is listening, is just to see children of the Rebbe, Chassidim of the Rebbe, soldiers of the Rebbe, in their own way, in their own humble way. You know, we're Anoshim Kerkeinu, none of us consider ourselves great people, even though everybody has, I'm sure, a healthy ego. But relatively speaking, in the scheme of things, that's why we were so shocked when the Rebbe said, do everything you can. Because who are we? Mi ani, umani. The Rebbe's not doing it, how are we going to do it? But the fact is, the mere fact that 31 years, it's a generation, since that powerful day, Chavches Nisan, Tovshinun Aleph, 31 years, 35 years since the Sikha of Purim Tov Shemem Zayin, where the Rebbe essentially said the same idea. Again, words we heard throughout this Farbrengen. And that we're here gathering together with enthusiasm, with energy, with passion, each in their own way, that alone should tear open the heavens. When you see the Rebbe would so often quote the word of the Alter Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe and all the Rabbeim, that the greatest nachas for a father is when he sees his children united together. And of course, the opposite is also true, the greatest aggravation. And what a Farbrengen can do, Malach Machol cannot accomplish. So that alone is, in a sense, isn't that a fulfillment, a bit at least, of what the Rebbe asked of us, that maybe there'll be 10 of you that will come together and cry, Ad Mosai Metan Emes. So as much as Emes that we're capable of. The fact is, we haven't forgotten. Not only haven't we forgotten, we're doing this Farbrengen, we're doing Tut Alts, Lefiyerech. We know B'chol Moedecha is Lefiyerech. Moedecha, as much as you can do. Can we do more? Absolutely. Which brings me to my second hergish and feeling that I like to share. And that is, they say insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So while we have to acknowledge the beauty of this achdus and unity, the fact that people are crying out from different parts of the world, we are trying our best, Rebbe, to do what we can to bring Moshiach and Gula. Chassidim, shluchim, shluches all over the world, men, women, children, are doing their part. Again, much more can be done. That alone is a very powerful thing. But at the same time, the Rebbe also taught us that we can't look back at what we've done. We have to look ahead. If the Geula B'Peil is not here in the fullest sense of the word, that means something has not been done. And that's exactly the Rebbe's word, Tut Alts V'Sikent. So I think while we acknowledge this tremendous effort and everything that has been done the last 31 years and more, actually all the way back from the Rebbe's, the beginning of the Rebbe's Nesias. So we're talking now 82 years, 72 years, I should say, from Tovshin Yud till where we are now. But there's the other side of it, and that is action. At the end of the day, we must do something that has not been done till now. And it has to be derech yeshara. The Rebbe told us the way. We're not looking for radical, novel, new ways. There's a Torah, there's mitzvahs. It's in that, those parameters. But the way it should be done has to be radical. Eiris deteyu and kelim detikun, using the Rebbe's words from Chavches Nisan. And I believe that's the second part of what the Rebbe said. Yeshlemer, the two parts where the one, he said that the Hirotzen, two Hirotzens in the Sikha. One is that there'll be 10 of you that will cry with a true emes, sincerely, from the depths of your heart, Ad Mosai. And the second, the last words, what were the last words that Rebbe said in that Sikha? After he said that I will make you all a shliach for tzedakah, he said, V'hi ratzon, that among you we found 1, 2, 3, al kaponim. That will sich zusammenreden, was zu tun und wie zu tun. We'll strategize how to do and what to do, and the ikar, that it should be come down in action, b'simcha v'tuv levav. So clearly there was also a call to action, not just to cry out. When I say just, I don't mean that to minimize it, but in addition to that. And it's interesting that the Rebbe would use the expression, ein et zwei drei. Where else do you find that the Rebbe limited these activities? Any mitzvah film, mitzvah kashrus, mitzvah, any mitzvah, the Rebbe said 10, 1, 2, or 3. And here the Rebbe used that number. So we could farbrengen about that, but I want to submit the following, and this is what I think is the punchline of it all. The punchline of it all is that the Rebbe was looking for true change that has to come initiated in some way, generated by us. And he was hoping that there'd be at least 1, 2, or 3. If there'd be more, great. He was hoping that people would sit down and actually strategize. So I would suggest, humble suggestion to us all, and especially to the VAD that organized this, to gather all the suggestions that were made throughout this, that will be made and were made and will be made through this 24-hour period, the practical suggestions, just to sum it up, 1, 2, 3, what category it belongs in. Because this, in a way, is zusammenreden, was zu tun und wie zu tun. That's what we're doing. But it won't go anywhere if it just remains talk and it just remains on a recording. To actually gather it together, and it could be it's hundreds of ideas, maybe it's tens of ideas, I'm not sure. But to put it down, and then can be discussed and strategized, and see, some things are probably easier to do, some things are harder to do, some things are bigger, more global, and some things are more local. This is very clear. So I, instead of pulling and explaining, which I'll try to do a little in this discussion, but I really think it needs to come down to action, because that was the whole call to action, they say, a call to action. But everyone has the big question. So what can we do and what should we do? And it's clearly something that has to come from us. Aveda b'keich atzmei is something that Kavyochel, the Rebbe did everything he could do, Mamayla Lamata, what a Rebbe does, providing us with chassidus, providing us with the tools, with the instruments, providing us with the inspiration and guidelines and direction, because without that, we wouldn't even be here talking about it. Let's be honest. Who would be talking about Moshiach if we're not for that? But then there's that effort on our end. And from the Purim Tov Shemem Zayin Sicha, it's very clear that there was a shift. Very clear. The Rebbe says that after Yigiyah, after the Rebbe's Yigiyah, effort, the Rebbe came, the only answer he was able to find why the Geula didn't come in these decades, since the Frierdiker Rebbe announced it, L'alta l'tshuva, l'alta l'geula, the same question we're asking now. The Rebbe said the only answer is that it went over from Hanossi to Hakoil. So there was a shift, something that we were not expected to do beforehand, because if we were, we would have been told. And now it's expected. And that's why the Rebbe stood in that each one of us has to be involved in this process. So much has been said about this, and I'm sure much more will be said. But what can be said after 31 years that has not been? And again, within the parameters. So the big question a lot of people ask is, what does it mean when the Rebbe said the Berurim are finished? All we have to do is open our eyes. Many people say, where are Berurim finished? There's a war going on in Ukraine. There's murder, Rahman al-Islam. There's injustice. There's divisiveness. There are enemies. Okay, I mean, all kinds of things, terrorist attacks. In our own hearts and souls, there's a Yetzer Hara. Many people will say quite active. Where do you see a shift and a difference? An obvious question, a basic question. And if I don't see a difference, so how am I supposed to relate to what the Rebbe is saying? So I want to suggest to everyone that there's actually a letter from the Rebbe, and being someone who's worked in the Sichos, as was mentioned, everything the Rebbe said in Tov Shin Nun and Nun Aleph and Nun Beis, though there are definitely new things that were not said before, especially that the Berurim were finished, but the concepts are not new. Moshiach is not a new concept that was born in Tov Shin Nun or Nun Aleph. It goes back to the beginning of time. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says, "Lo nivra elam ela b'shum Mashiach." The whole world was created for Mashiach. It's one of the Yud Gimel Ikrim. We mentioned it 6-7 times in the Shemay Nesra. So I mean to say it's a fundamental principle. So everything that Rebbe said, you'll find in earlier talks. There was a Kavitz Shuvas B'Yurim. It was really Kavitz Lubavitch that the Rebbe published in the Shins. And there was a section called Shuvas Biyurim, which later became a separate booklet, and today is printed in Igros Kodesh in volumes 1 and 2 of the Rebbe's letters. So one of the letters, which is in the summer of Tafshin Hey, so it's right close to the time when the Frierdiker Rebbe began the storm about La'alta L'Tshuva, La'alta L'Gula. So there's a long letter that the Rebbe answers to someone who asked to explain the details about Chiyas HaMeis, about the resurrection of the future. But the Rebbe goes in his classic inimitable way with a long introduction to first explain the basis of Moshiach itself. This, in my opinion, is a must read. First of all, it's clear. The ultimate clarity is fascinating. But I just want to refer to a few lines. The Rebbe says they're clear terms. And I'm just reading straight. This is printed now in Igros Kodesh. I'm looking at volume 2, page Samech 68. So the Rebbe says, Klolos habriya beikra heleches umizbareres umishhtalemes, that the general creation is in a process of evolution toward becoming a more refined and better world, with some dips and ups and downs. But overall, the cumulative effect is a more refined world, because every time you do a good deed, every time someone does a mitzvah never disappears. Yichud Zel L'mayla is forever. So it releases an energy that changes the world. And therefore, ultimately, we're going to come to a point where the world will become refined. And it's not the same world that existed 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and definitely not 1,000 or 2,000, 3,000 years ago. One of the things, the traps in human psychology, is that we think that we live in the here and now. We think everything has always been the way it is right now. And it's hard to imagine. We read in history books that there were the tragedies that happened in the last generation, the wars, and so on. But according to Pesach Amunah, and here the Rebbe documents it clearly, the world has changed, and not automatically, due to the millions, if not billions, of mitzvahs and Mesiras Nefesh that has happened through the generations. We must know that. Without that understanding, you can say, what's different today than it was 100 years ago, 200 years ago? Yes, it's an easier life. There's certain comforts. There's a democracy. No, these are not anomalies. It's actually real change. And second point, that it was always meant to be this way. The natural state of the world is not a world of war and not a world of evil. What did the world look like in Gan Eden before Adam and Chava came? So we all know Basa Legani, the first Maimon of the Rebbe, Tafshin Yud Aleph. What does it say? Let's translate that in simple English. The world was a beautiful world. It was a garden. The famous Sikh of the Rebbe, Yud Shvat Tov Shalamed Beis, the world is fundamentally a garden. In contrast, even though he doesn't mention Freud and doesn't mention other secular thinkers, Darwin and others, in contrast to others, the Rebbe says, who say the world's a jungle, that a human being is fundamentally a selfish creature, the Torah says the world is a garden fundamentally, and a human being was created in the divine image, B'Tselem Elokim. However, that was concealed through Chet Tzadas, as we learn in Basa Legani. One concealment, another concealment, another concealment. And Avraham Avinu began to reverse the process. And what's the conclusion in that Maimer, the Rebbe's? That's our job now. We're finishing the process, the seventh generation from the Alter Rebbe, like Moshe Rabbeinu, the seventh generation from Avraham Avinu. Each of us must be able to translate this in simple English. To mention back to the story of Kentucky that you brought up when you introduced me. I have seen this in cities and countries across the world, places you wouldn't believe. I remember when my book Toward a Meaningful Life was published. So I remember one of the editors, they were all almost Jewish, all living in New York. And to be surprised, many of them never heard of the Rebbe even before. Maybe in passing, but definitely not in any serious way. One of my editors, who considered himself a convert to Presbyterianism, but he was a Jewish guy. He was the editor-in-chief. And he said to me, I read your chapter, the last chapter on redemption. I was very curious to hear the Jewish perspective because I was born Jewish. And he said, I was blown away by it. I couldn't even sleep because I realized that redemption, what we call Geula, is not something that is a novelty that will happen. In other words, the world has always been, in his words, controlled by original sin, by negativity. And then something's going to happen that's going to change that. He says, no, it's always been a beautiful world. that was concealed to the point that the concealment itself concealed itself. Haster aster ponai, famous tale of the Baal Shem Tov, that we don't even think, we think this is normal. The Rebbe once in Yechidah, someone asked the Rebbe, why does he cry out and why is he so passionate and so desperate for Geula, Moshiach? And I think it was a doctor, I'm not sure. And the Rebbe said to him, when you recognize that someone is ill and sick, do you just sit around apathetic and passive? Or do you yell out and scream? We have to do something. Someone came into the emergency room. Goal, as the Rebbe said, is called displacement. Psychological, emotional displacement means we're not in a natural place. It's an unhealthy reality. It's an unhealthy perspective on yourself and on life. You think the world is controlled by selfish people. It's true. On the media level, it may be that way, but it's not the natural thing. And when you know that, you cry out. So this editor-in-chief said to me that to understand that the world is actually a beautiful place and human beings have that beauty within them, it's just been concealed, and it took years, thousands of years, to eliminate the concealments, to eliminate the forces that we call evil, that in some way polluted the universe. And now we're ready to embrace the deeper essential beauty and light within it. He was surprised by that. This is basically translation of Basar Lagani and a translation of the Hasidic approach to what Geula Mashiach is. So when you look at this letter that I'm quoting from the Igros Kodesh, from the Rebbe, which was printed in Tshuvas Yibur and Mekevus Lubavitch, you have a picture the Rebbe describes, and listen what he says afterwards. The Rebbe says afterwards. And in general, there are three tkufas, three zmanim. One zman, Elam Hazeh, Yemesa Mashiach, V'tchias HaMesim. Elam Hazeh, he says, is man ha-malchama bein hayesh v'haruchni. Is a war. There's a battle going on between selfishness and selflessness, between inner goodness, transcendence, and your own self-interest and your own self-contained good. Hatei v'hara, ulum ulum yemotz, and the more powerful one dominates. L'pomim natzeach hatei, u'l'pomim chulu. Sometimes good prevails, and sometimes the opposite. The second period, b'yamesa Mashiach ki yashlimu b'nei Yisrael es hamalchama v'yavaru hatei min hara. And he goes on to say, once this battle has been finished, he doesn't say suddenly the whole world will change. He says, we'll be able to see a person, will be able to distinguish between what is right and wrong. Whereas it was all mixed together, which is called birurim, trying to clarify, trying to separate. And that point, he says that we can then look at it. The Rebbe doesn't use the words open your eyes, but essentially you see things for what they really are. People ask, well, we see today all kinds of negative things, but we see it. In that same Purim Tov Shemem Zayin Sikha, you know, the Rebbe said in the next Sikha after that, he spoke about it. What about all those negative things happening? So the Rebbe said that's also part of the process toward Geula, because at the end of the process, the negativity is not concealed. It starts arising. It's like the grime that comes out of the pores as a person gets warmed up. So you start seeing even the final the throes of the negative forces in this world. So I'm not going to read the whole letter, but I definitely recommend, especially in the spirit of everything we're doing, is to read this letter. It gives you, in the Rebbe's own words, because this is something the Rebbe wrote by himself. This is not a Sicha Hanoche that the Rebbe edited. He wrote it himself, even though Hanoche, the Rebbe edited, is Kodesh Kodashim. He wrote it himself, a complete description of what Geula Mashiach is. So when you talk about what we're supposed to be doing, it's very clear that it's all about perspective. It's all about how we look at ourselves and at the world around us. And as I said, I have seen this play itself out, not among Chassidim, not among people who accept whatever the Rebbe says as emes lamite, that they see in their own lives, they see Geula emerging. They see it emerging. There's a word that I heard, I remember when I was in yeshiva in Morristown, so our mashpia, Rab Melech Tzvi Olav Shalom. So I asked them once, I said, why do we learn these deep inyanim in Chassidus? Samachvov and Ayin Beis, all the Askolos of Chassidus. Even though we may understand some of it, but it's completely beyond us. We barely are able to reach Asiyah Ruchnius in our battle with our Yetzer Hara and Nefesh Habamis. Here we're learning about things in Yitzira and Beriya, Atzilus, that the Alter Rebbe would tremble when he mentioned the word Atzilus, let alone things Lifnei Atzimtzum. So he said he once had a similar question. He asked it to Rab Shmuel Levittin, Ashbiyan 770. And Rab Shmuel said that he heard in the name of Rab Gershon Ber Pahara, a famous chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek, that Gershon Ber Pahara gave once an answer the following with a moshel. Briefly, the moshel is that there was a king who was traveling in the woods with his entourage, and he heard from a distance a beautiful melody, so beautiful that he was completely mesmerized. He never heard it before. And he could not get it out of his head and heart. When he came back to the palace, he says, you have to find for me the musician that was playing that. I never heard such beautiful music. Well, to his chagrin, no matter what they did, they couldn't find that musician. They reached out to the entire empire, musicians from all over the world, playing songs and songs and songs to the king. And he kept saying, beautiful, but it's not it. It's not it. And that's what that was the end of that story. So Rabbi Gershon Ber told the Moshel, he said, when you learn Chassidus, it's the beautiful, most beautiful music that you ever heard. It's the most beautiful music reflecting the music of the neshama in Lamaila, pure ruchnius, elokus. Then you come down to this world and you're made to forget. Every child is taught the entire Torah in its mother's womb. So in our super conscious, it remains there, as the Alter Rebbe says in the Likutei Torah Shlach. But our conscious, we're made to forget. The Malach makes us forget. But our neshama always remembers. And it's always looking for that music. So we learn Chassidus because Chassidus teaches us something about that music. And the rest of our lives, we're looking for that music. We look for it in our food. We look for it in our travel. We look for it in all kinds of pleasures of this world, hopefully kosher pleasures. And when you learn Chassidus, you come to realize at least, sinishdas. So even though you may not fully understand what means Erein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum, or Elokuz Begoli, Elokuz Bepshitus, and Elmis Bischachus, but at least you know that the rest of the world, it's not that. I would like to suggest that the Rebbe came and did something even more. Not just to teach us that it's not, that everything that we enjoy in this world, as much as pleasurable as it may be, at least you know there's something more that actually gave us a taste of godliness. And that's what the Rebbe was both frustrated by and also demanding from us. And saying, "Was noch kenechtan?" That's what I did for 41 years. What did the Rebbe do? He gave us a taste of godliness, a Farbrengen, not just the words, the nigunim, and more than that, the passion, the total commitment. And what did the Rebbe do? He went a war against apathy. The Maimer V'ata Tetzava was mentioned before, and I'm sure others mentioned it. What is the Rebbe's klippa? What is the klippa of our time? The klippa of our time is the apathy, the indifference, that we're comfortable. We sleep peacefully. I remember Time magazine wrote an article about the Rebbe and Moshiach before Gimel Tammuz, a very positive article, and how the Rebbe brought the Moshiach consciousness into human beings. At the end, the writer writes, you can use this both positive and negative. He says, at the end of the day, Chabad Lubavitchers have not changed their summer plans. So on one hand, you could say it's a positive. We're not standing by train stations recklessly, just waiting for Mashiach. We're doing what we have to be done, what has to be done. But on the other hand, you could say there's also a certain, we know about Mashiach, but still, we don't change our summer plans. The war against apathy. I don't really have a solution for that. I think that is our greatest challenge. And one more point I'd like to make and conclude with, and that is, until Mashiach becomes a tangible reality, for you and I, it's going to be impossible to communicate that to anyone else. So while we have to cry out, and that's why this gathering is so beautiful, this Farbrengen, we also have to do something to somewhat internalize it. I would make a strong suggestion to each one of us, including to myself, and something we can do with our children. Create a challenge. And the challenge is, describe what Geula will look like if Mashiach comes right now. What will your house look like? What will the street look like? What will work look like? What will tomorrow morning look like? I brought this a number of times. There's a powerful letter from the Rebbe, Toiv Sivan, Yud Zayin Sivan, Toiv Sivan, Tovshin Yud Aleph. First year of the Rebbe's Nesias. It's a letter to a person who owned the dry cleaners. The Rebbe says everything we see and hear, the Baal Shem Tov says, is a lesson of Avedus Hashem. And what does the Rebbe say there? What's the lesson from a dry cleaners? You buy a garment, you wear it once, twice, 3 times. After a while, if you're a Baal Batisha person, it gets wrinkled, it gets soiled, it gets stained. You can't wear it again. Comes the cleaners, the chiddush of the cleaner, the innovation. Yes, you immerse this garment, you bring it to the cleaners. They immerse it in water, in warm water, mix it with chemicals that get rid of the stains. Then you dry it, put it under a press, a heavy press, and there you have a fresh garment, and you can repeat this process many times. What's the lesson? The neshama is a pure soul, as we said. That's its natural state, not a negative state. But then it gets soiled, and it gets wrinkled, and it gets stained by life. Deliberate mistakes we make, inadvertent ones, but it pollutes the soul. So you would think it's a one-way street. You can't do anything about it. Comes the cleaners and teaches us, no, immerse the neshama in ein mayim ela teira. Teira is water. Not just water, cold water, but vadimkeit, warm water, passion, chmimus. And then mix it with chemicals. Every mitzvah is another chemical that gets rid of another stain, another toxin. And then put it under Kabbalah's oil of heavy press and accountability to something greater than we are, to the Eibishter, Kabbalah's Malchus Shamayim, and the neshama reclaims its innocence, it reclaims its tahirihi, and this can be repeated many times. A beautiful era, but here's the main thing. I read this letter approximately Tov Aleph. Approximately this time of year when the Rebbe spoke Achri Gedeshim about putting the Aleph of Alufa Shalelam into Gela, which makes it Geula. I was walking up Kingston Avenue, and suddenly I noticed the dry cleaners. When do we notice a dry cleaner? Who even looks? You notice it when you need to bring your clothing there. But because of the letter, I looked at the dry cleaners. And then I saw another one on Crown Street. One between Montgomery and Empire, one on Crown, one between Union and President. Then there's one on Albany and one on Troy, whatever. This is just Crown Heights. I noticed it because I suddenly remembered the letter. And I never looked at a dry cleaners the same way again. The Rebbe gave us literally an approach of taking the Aleph. The dry cleaners is not just cleaning clothing. It's a moshel, be'elam hazeh agashmi, a physical moshel for what? For the soul's regeneration, for the soul's renewal. And everything in this world.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. Moshiach is coming in a Nefen Afachishena, so let's finish up also in a Nefen Afachishena.
I will. I'm summing up from here. So then I came to realize that this is what the Rebbe gave us, a lens. The eyes of the Rebbe, how he sees a cleaners. So then you could apply the same thing to bakeries and to pizza shops, and you mentioned chocolate, and to grocery stores, and to everything, to astronomy, to physics. What in this world is not a moshel for Elokus? Mepsari erze elokah. So this is something practical that each one of us can do in our own small scale. A gili of Alufa Shalelim in your personal life. And we educate our children in this way. This becomes at least one step that each one of us can somewhat bring the taste of Geula Mashiach, which is the natural purpose and the natural state of existence, the perfected state, into our tangible reality. And today, thank God, we don't have the Gzeres V'Shmodis, we don't have the decrees, we don't have a world that we have to fight for our very existence and for our very rights. We can Farbrengen like we do here. May the Eibush to help that we children of the Rebbe can cry out and say to the Rebbe, look, 31 years after your Sikha, we're living with it, we're doing our best, or we're trying our best, we will do even more, and have already Rachmanis, and bring the Gula Amitis V'Ashlema after all the thousands of years of efforts and work and everything that we've done. As the Rebbe said himself, the Berurim are finished, and V'hu Yigalenu, and we can finally be Megala, the Geula, the Aleph, in Geula, and reveal and bring the Geula, should be taken from Miyad Mamish even before the end of this mega Farbrengen. L'chaim, my friends, l'chaim Chassidim, l'chaim Brider.
L'chaim, Reb Simon. We can listen to you for days and days. It's wonderful the way you bring together and weave the Akida V'Yedel Kol Ba'ei Olam. May every resident of this world acknowledge and know that Mashiach is on the way, but it has to begin with us, like you said. It has to be tangible to us. All the examples that you gave, I wanted to bring to everyone's attention that there is a booklet that's recently been printed. Hopefully we can soon post the link in the chat box called Living with Moshiach B'chol Asher Tasa, giving examples of how every aspect of life is truly a representation of the coming of Moshiach. We're now going to have the opportunity to see a short part of a Farbrengen that occurred on Yud Gimel Tammuz Tafshin Chaf Beis, where the Rebbe talked about the importance of awakening the neshama in every single yid. Yasher koach Reb Simon.
Thank you.
Und auf der Ruf sagt man, als da Tafkid, als da eine Licht, was man ist, siebische Tiere, seien sie noch nicht angezündet. Und was ist darin, was ist ein Chossid, als darf gehen und anzünden Licht. Ist auf der Ruf, hat viele der Bewohner ist, hat der Lanternenstück weiß, hat der Feier nicht seine. Und das, was geht jenem anzünden, ist der Ingen, was leicht noch, sie das schämen. Und Psylo, ist das nicht seine, das liegt bei jenem schön fertiger Heid. Und das, was jenem anzünden, nicht der Pirush, als bringt ihm ein Ingen mit Bachutz, weckt in dem Muf oder der Ingen, was da beim Zweiten von früher. Davon sind nach Zweitens nicht schon ist mehr nicht, was mir darf jene Meere sein, Megale sein, die Nekuda Sayades, was hat bei sich behalten, auf Aris nehmen, ihr Milat Mina Keche Lapel, danach wird es bei jenem Jatzmi wichtig.
Spending Pesach here together. At our program, we wanted to do a learning component, and we chose to use the curriculums by Tut Alts. I think that both renditions, the adult and the children's, are terrific.
I think this book makes it relatable in a way that I haven't learned it before, so it's nice to have it laid out clearly.
I like having the book because it's fun to learn.
I like learning from it, and I like new clean books.
We can see just from the last few moments how much Tut Alts and how much the Moshiach office has accomplished and how many resources they've provided for us over the last few months, just a little bit more than a year. The Rebbe asked for 1 or 2 or 3 Jungeleiter sollen sich einaktion and to be stubborn, to insist on the coming of Moshiach. Kan HaMokem, this is a wonderful time to express our gratitude, our akadas hatov for the entire staff at the Moshiach office in Merkez 302, beginning with Rabbi Moshe Kotlarsky and all the way through to Rabbi Shlomo Naparstik and his wife. And Rabbi Shlomo Naparstik wanted to make sure that we emphasize the fact that this is not an effort that is put together by one person or by a group of people, but that this is an effort that can only be successful if we galvanize the entire Lubavitch and the entire Jewish world. And so that the stubbornness seeps through from Merkez 302 to all of us, and we all become Tut Altsnikas, and indeed, to, as we saw in the previous video, to ignite the spark in the heart of every Yid, to find the natural connection with the Eibishter that every Yid has. And I don't know another younger man, a shliach, who can more adequately inspire and empower us to bring out the natural vadimkeit, the natural warmth of a Chassidish neshama than the shliach who's going to Farbrengen with us now, Rab Shalom Moshe Paltil from Fort Worth, Washington. Not only does he accomplish so much in his local shlichus, but he has taken upon himself a much broader shlichus to inspire shluchim worldwide with the many, many initiatives that he has undertaken. On a personal level, I have many reasons to be makir tov, to be grateful for Rav Shalom Moshe for many, many nuggets of inspiration that I've received from him throughout the years. And I'm sure that among the 175 of us that are on here, many of us have also been inspired by Rav Shalom Moshe. So please make a l'chaim Shalom Moshe and share with us some words of inspiration. And please keep an eye on the clock, because at the half-hour point, we're moving to the next presenter. Please unmute yourself.
L'chaim Chassidim, L'chaim Laser. You know, you could spend a whole 23 minutes that I have left just explaining the Reichkeit of this Farbrengen, but it's obvious. L'chaim. So I was invited to Farbrengen Yutas Kislev by a shliach. This is probably almost 20 years ago. And he had a big mesibah of Mekurabim, a few hundred people at dinner. And at the end, he invited back to his house the closer people. You know, just the men, the chevre who come to learn, who are off and beg, so to speak. And we're sitting around the room, most of them not Lubavitcher looking, but you could see they knew the Nigunim and were sitting and Farbrengen a whole night with the shliach. And at some point, 2, 3 in the morning, I was very inspired just seeing what goes on. So I said to them, you know, I'm done. Now you guys talk. Tell me what brought you to Mereben, to Yiddishkeit, to Frumkeit. Tell me your story. We're around the whole table. It's one large dining room table. And everybody told their story. A Perek Tanya brought them, a shir from the rabbi, I don't know, JLI, the wife's cholent, a smile from the baby. And each one has a story. What triggers their path to Mereben, to the Eibishter, to Yiddishkeit. And then there was one guy sitting right across the table from me, dressed with the whole Lubavitch garb, like a chassid looks on Yutas Kislev, maybe the only one at the table. And a young man. And I said, look him in the eye, and I say, "No, tell me, what's your story? Who brought you?" And he says, "The Rebbe." So I made a quick calculation that if he looks the age that he is, if he is the age that he looks, he maybe knew the Rebbe when he was 10, 11, 12 maximum. I said, "You mean a video, a sikh?" He says, "No, the Rebbe." I said, "What do you mean?" So he starts to explain. He says, "I was part of a Jewish youth group, very secular Jewish youth group, Zionistic, nothing to do with Frumkeit or Torah mitzvahs at all, somewhere in the Midwest. And the year-end trip was to New York. We were told that we were there in October, that you come to 770, this big shul, Simchas Torah, forget about it. It's the best experience." So we went. Apparently they came the last night. It was Kesha Bracha. We walk in, and he's describing how the room looks to the people around the table who obviously never stood by a Farbrengen. It's Kesha Bracha, the Rebbe is singing, and the people are up, and the benches, he says it was like a Jewish Super Bowl. The Rebbe Machtazeh, everyone's up and down. He says, we felt out of place. They gave us like little white kippahs, you know, here we are in this room full of Hasidic rabbis. He said it took us like 4 seconds to realize that we are VIPs. And then they put us on the benches so we could see. And suddenly our madrich said to us, "You want to go see the rabbi, get some wine?" And we were like, "Whoa, of course." Most of the kids, it was an adventure, but to me, it was like, what? This rabbi is going to give me wine just because I showed up? And they put us on the express line. And as I'm getting closer and recognizing, they told us this is the chief rabbi, you know, the whole world maybe. I'm wondering, like, why is he going to take the time to see us just because we showed up? He said, in my temple, I never met the chief rabbi of the temple. I deal with the assistant, or maybe the assistant's assistant. Suddenly, this chief rabbi of the whole world, he needs to meet me. Obviously, this Yid was a very, you know, deep person, serious person. And as the line is moving closer, he's like, he cannot believe what's happening. He doesn't understand. Shtei Tayyid, the Rebbe, in that age, whatever it is, this is literally Tafshin Nun Beis Vaistais, Tishrei, maybe. And we showed up. And he says, I come close to the Rebbe face to face. And at this point in his narrative, he pulls out of his, took a picture of the Rebbe looking into the eyes of a 12-year-old boy who's dressed with a little kippah. And the eye contact is beyond. It's a famous picture. It's been printed in Shmotkin's booklet, other places. And he breaks out crying. Apparently, he carries his picture with him 24/6. And he says, the Rebbe looked at me for, I don't know, a couple of seconds. And it felt like for 5 minutes, even though it was a couple of seconds. And he said, I couldn't help thinking, why is this rabbi taking me so seriously? No one ever did. And he said he walked away and he knew it's going to be different. He's got to figure out who this rabbi is and what he's about. When the Rebbe says to us, we didn't want to hear it, and it's harsh words, etc. But to me, part of it is, I take you so seriously. You're serious, you're real. Every Yid, every Nivid of Amrad is serious, every human being, but every Yid, let alone Chassidim, which the Rebbe called Karma Shalai, his own vineyard. So the Rebbe is saying, I take you seriously, and I trust you, and you can do it. So that is, to me, in a very positive way, the message. Chavches Nissen was very harsh language, very short. Many Chassidim believe that Purim Mem Zayin was really the same theme. So recently I had a chance to watch that Sicha over again, those Sichas, when it came Purim time. And now it's so many years later. And a few things struck me which I think are helpful. At least I'm going to share, maybe they're helpful. I'm going to make 4 points that I saw in that Sicha, briefly. First thing is, the Rebbe mentioned in detail that the Inyan of La'altel L'Gul, La'altel L'Tshuva, the Frierdiker Rebbe spoke about it and printed it up, a Kriya V'Kedusha, and he even made it clear that when you print something, it's forever. And the Rebbe says, then we know the Frierdiker Rebbe is automatically paskening, so to speak, if that's the language, that he's speaking about something which will have Noch Mei of Esrim Shana, will be after his physical lifetime. So the Rebbe is trying to say the message is alive, even though it's after Yud Shvat, the Kriya V'Kedusha, the message of La'altel L'Gul doesn't change. The proof is the Frierdiker Rebbe spoke about it in terms of, he said that anything that I'm printing, I want it to be printed, it should be l'datus. So the Frierdiker Rebbe is saying that it's something that may have to be played out over time, and therefore it's relevant and alive. I'm watching that and I'm saying, what's the Rebbe saying? He's sitting on a video. Not alone, it was printed in Hebrew and Lahak and Yiddish and everything else. And the Rebbe is, to me, I felt the Rebbe is saying it may not play itself out the way the Rebbe had hoped. Apparently it should play out l'chatchila before Gimel Tammuz. But this is something that the Rebbe wants. It should be imprinted and should be on a video. And we should see it, and we should sit around so many years later and spend hours each year on a regular basis too, talking about it. This is l'datus, meaning to say that this is real, and the Rebbe at Als Bavorin, the Rebbe prepared us, and it's not like, God forbid, the plan got messed up. The plan is playing out. That's the first Nakud. Another Nakud is, the Rebbe spoke to Barich as one of the signs of Moshiach. We see unbelievable good and unbelievable bad. There's a lot of different interpretations. Maybe they're all true. Maybe it's in certain individuals. Tremendous amounts of tzedakah people were giving them. In the Jewish world, I think even beyond the Rebbe was referring to, people give away billions of dollars. But the Rebbe spoke there. We live in a world where we see good sky to built in Meshur, never imagined. And the Ksei Hafchi, the opposite. How many times have you and I looked around the world now, post Gimel Tammuz? And on one hand, we see it's gefährlich. First of all, to our children and grandchildren, the Rebbe is on a video. And all the other things, the challenges, Pashat, unsere eigene Kinder that should be inspired, ourselves to be inspired, and the world, the morality of the world. I mean, ain't kind of muck. We don't have to go into details. The morality of the world, things that were ridiculous even last year are totally normal. And on the other hand, it's extraordinary. Forget about the growth of Chabad. I mean, everybody knows the Pew study. I love talking about it in my community. 38% of Jews, American Jews, had association with Chabad in the last year. In the last Pew study, they didn't even put Chabad on, because what's Chabad? It's not a denomination. Somebody said, hello, Chabad is on the map. I don't know what they are, but you got to put them down. 38% of American Jews had some involvement with Chabad. Friends, in case you don't know, that's more than all denominations combined. We have to say it because it's the truth. Almost like the Rebbe complained, but we didn't say there was Nisim. And also, we look at Kerem Chabad. Look at this, Farbrengen. Look at the amount of Pu'ulis. Look at the Shluchim B'chol Katz V'Tevel. It's out of control. People who never saw the Rebbe going out, pushing Mesiris Nefesh. Look at all the Pu'ulis from headquarters that we're doing on such a high level. Look at the Bachrim. You're feeling down one day that things aren't going well. Sit the night with Bachrim, or sit with Chassidish girls, or Young Light, and you see that it's not less than it was, and Yesh Leimer more. So which one is it? They're so inspired, and yet there's so much challenge. So this is obviously what we're seeing. What the Rebbe said in that Sikha, it's a simony of Geula. I'm not sure exactly what the cheshbon is, but I am suggesting that the Rebbe, I heard from Chaim Gutnick al Vashon, we were in Melbourne in the MEMS. He told us that he had Yechidus, Tafshich of Dald. he was complaining to the Rebbe about the way that the world is going crazy. This is the 60s. Compared to today, it was normal, but it was pretty bad. So a Yid like Chaim Gutnik is a Rav and a Chiddush Rav, and apparently I wasn't in the Yechidus, but the feeling was he was complaining to the Rebbe that how are we gonna raise a generation in a straight and narrow? How are we gonna makata people in this environment? The world's nuts. Anything goes. We're redefining life, values, everything. And he said to us that the Rebbe told him, the Rebbe basically told him not to be nispal. And the Rebbe told him the nisayon of this day, every day has its nisayon, which is its purpose. The nisayon of this day is b'chira chavshis, total b'chira chavshis. And that's exactly what we have. And therefore, people who are not careful are going to lose their minds. Conversely, by that b'chira chavshis, the opportunity for people to really choose. And that's why you have, this is already my own Pirush Rashi, you have the two extremes. Talk about b'chira chavshis in the 60s. Today, a person can choose, a child, a teenager, an adult, anybody can choose anything they want to do. You know, it used to be a time, if you wanted to sin, you had to know somebody, you had to have connections. Today, the whole world's at your fingertips. L'tev and u'lemutev. So a person can wring their hands and say, this is terrible, this is so scary. So the Rebbe says, this is it. Total b'chira chavshis. I trust you. You can do it. I take you seriously. And you have free choice. You're not doing it because everyone's going to know. You're sitting in an environment where everybody's doing the same things. Everybody can do their own thing today. But in that moment, that opportunity where we could fall to the lowest, we could also fall to the highest. And we see Baruch Hashem to a great degree, Mahal Tzachon, and Tefeach, Hamanas Latfiach, and more so from day to day. So that's the second point. Third point, the Rebbe was Madgish. Maisa B'Poel. If you listen to the Sikha of Purim Zayin, again, it's echoed later in Chasnisim, but Purim Zayin, it's much more Purim Dik, much more explained. So the language is, the Rebbe is into the Rambam, Maisa Echad. I mean, this is not a new Rambam. And it's not even a new Sikha. And the Rebbe is screaming like as if he's entdecked America, something new. So again, take it or leave it. But this is my own heritage from watching it. The Rebbe is telling us to be foot soldiers. Just do it. A lot of time we spend time in Cheshbainis, especially Chassidus Chabad, and we try to make Cheshbon Nefesh a whole time on my Chassidish, on my holy. Do I mean him Tanemes? You know the famous Ma'aseh Dal Rebbe, the guy said he doesn't mean Tanemes when he gives tzedakah, and Dal Rebbe said the poor man means it. Just do it. Just learn, daven, learn Chassidus, give tzedakah, do mivtzayim. The Rebbe is saying, I'm taking care of the inyanim, the higher level stuff. Your job is to follow me. And the reason why this is so important is because this is something that the Yitzhahara, it's a Chassidish Yitzhahara, and he comes along and gets us down very easily because he says, you're a chassid. Since when did you feel the Rebbe? When did you this? When did you davening mitanemes? This is a language that Chassidim always did in the past. But in my humble opinion and the opinion of Mashpiyim, the Rebbe is telling us today the Aveda is give yourself over and just pull the trigger. And I'm going to share a sikha, which I don't know if it's so well known, but it should be. That in B'Shalach, Shabbos B'Shalach, Tafshin Yud Daled, after the Rebbe's insists 3 years of since Tafshin Yud Aleph, or 4 years since Tafshin Yud Aleph account. It was extraordinary Farbrengen. Obviously, there's no tape, but it is a transcript in the Sikhs. And look at the footnotes, vices the Rebbe said, some L'chaim, had a lot of private conversations. Looks like a very uvgulate, very positive. And the Rebbe sort of, I'm very short on time, but the Rebbe sort of basically accepted the Nesiah, so to speak, b'simcha. Whereas till then, there were many Sikhs when the Rebbe complained that who am I, etc. In that Farbrengen, the Rebbe sort of said that there's 3 years of a vineyard that's Shnei Arla. The 4th year is the is a Naterevoy, and then after that, it's yours. And therefore, since 3-4 years passed, the Rebbe said, sort of in the power vested in me, I'm obviously paraphrasing, by the Balakadim, which is the Siderenu, I want to make a statement. I don't know how people know this. The same way the Rebbe made a statement, Yud Shvat, when he took the Nesias, the Rebbe made a statement there. And the Rebbe said 3 things. Number 1 is the Allah, those who need the blessing of children should have it. The Allah was dafin gebenchver, those who need the blessing for parnasa should have it. And then the Rebbe said the Allah was dafin poteven from the Moshiach Cheder, those who have to get rid of the melancholy should get rid of the melancholy. I'm reading the Sikha, I'm thinking to myself, you're giving a bracha to Anash that should have children. No doubt the bracha was Makuya. You're giving a bracha Anash to have parnasa. It's important. Hello, parnasa is important. And then what's the 3rd thing? Not they should be bichsidim, they should be inspired. They should not walk around melancholy. And in my reading of the Sikha, it means including and especially this spiritual melancholy. that, you know, that's a Chassidish thing. And you heard from many Chassidim, Aaron Lazet Seitlin tells over, many others that went to Yechidus and they complained about this and that, all these intangible things that they don't feel it and they don't know it. And they don't, Beryl Baumgarten, famous Yechidus. And the Rebbe said, take the melancholy and throw it out the window. Amalek Zeiten, higher level Chassidim, this was their thing. Today, the Rebbe made a very simple program. I'm the Rebbe. I got you covered. I'm talking to God. Just do it. Just do it. My friend Yosky Greenberg from Alaska, he wrote to the Rebbe in that period of time. And the Rebbe was speaking this language over and over and over. And he wrote to the Rebbe, am I understanding correctly, that the Rebbe wants Rechbet Shabbos? And what does the Rebbe want? What's the program? Very simple. You should follow. By the way, folgen is not so basic. You have to learn Ambam, you have to learn Sefer Mitzvahs, and you have to be from to watch what you see and what you listen to and what you read. And you have to do it's a lot. But don't worry about your madregas. So he wrote to the Rebbe, is he understanding correctly? That the Rebbe is saying, Laklet Shabbos, folgen. And the Rebbe answered him, I've been saying it all along. So that's the third Nakuda that I'm taking out from that Sikha. And finally, practice. This relates very much to the charity fund that they're trying to make for everybody to open up a charity page and get other people to do mitzvah and be an influencer. It's a fantastic thing. I understand now they're trying to get it done between now and like Beimit, and then it will be expanded. I mean, this is using technology. It's beyond, it's off the charts what technology can do. We're reaching Kol Katzve table, and here they're harnessing and Meshakayach to the leadership of Moshe and his whole team, and they be some Gem, and all the good work. So this, but it's right in the Sikha. So here's a hergish that I've had over the years and crystallized, and from that Sikha. In that Sikha, the Rebbe says it, and he's screaming it. That since I was trying to figure out what's going on, why is the Sheikh not coming? The Einzke beer was imagine the Rebbe says, after I heard of it, I only could come up with this beer. So I hit with the cup. And this is the only, what is the only thing? As it's a shaykhis, the chol echad ve'echad. Sa'in shakol echad ve'echad. Das make men him, das make men her, das make men kol echad ve'echad. Anoshim, noshim, v'tav, kol echad, something like that. What's the Lashon? Anoshim, v'tav, alle zusammen, kol gadol. There's a little bit of, first of all, again, what's the big deal? Of course, every Jew has to take the mitzvahs. What's the Rebbe saying? There's many interpretations, and you talk to Yidden like Sheis Taub and others. The Rebbe said that Rebbe Chasa Shtikol Admur, and the Rebbe put a piece of himself. It's all kind of ruchnis. I'm speaking from a balabatish practice thing. The Rebbe is screaming. Watch the video. It's status. Obviously, you can have dual meanings. The Rebbe is screaming. It's the inyam as a shaykh. It's a call lecha. That's make men hidden. That's make men here. Anoshim noshim b'tav. Alle zusammen kol lecha. So he just said it's individual. He put it on the individual, and then he said kol lecha. So here's just a balabatish practical thing. When I go and I have opportunity to do a mitzvah with a yid, I go to my dentist. I'm not officially wearing the mitzvah hat. I may not need be a shliach. I may be a nash or even a shliach. I'm just going to my dentist or my doctor, or I'm meeting somebody on the bus. And how often chatoy ani masker, where I'm lazy to put on the tefillin with the guy. I'm not in the mood of dealing with a stranger. I'm tired. I'll leave the tefillin in the car. The thought has crossed my mind. Don't tell anybody. Let it stay right here. And boss would sign a bit, nicht legen tefillin. You know what I mean? We did it last time, and I'm in a rush, and I'm tired, and I'm not in the mood. But then I say to myself, I've done this numerous times, many times. I say to myself, wait a minute, how many chassidim are now having the same opportunity? How many chassidim are in the opportunity, but das make men him, das make men hem, und das make men hier anoshim v'noshim, kol alle zusammen, kol echad. If I put on the tefillin, that's 10,000 tefillin. Because if everybody makes the same cheshbon, or 50,000, I don't know, whatever the numbers, I don't know, the numbers of anashos, Kain Yirbo, same thing with Neshek, and for the women, anything else. So therefore, if I have opportunity to do that thing, I grab it, because I know it's multiplied. By Tezenton and Hara, the Rebbe's Hentum, Fitz, Soldaten, the Rebbe's Kinderlach, pulling the trigger, B'chol Katzvi table. I'm out of time, but I've seen this in my community, my own, not only myself, my own people, the Yidden in my town, running around. I'll just share one anecdote, and I'll close with it. That it was a Shana Rabbah this year. And we're finishing with Lulav and Esrig, and I tell them, the Rebbe told us a very big thing to shake Lulav and a Yid, and it's very easy mitzvah. You go over to him, make a bracha and shake, and he has a mitzvah tater. So I told them, look, the Lulavim are there. If anyone could take it, bring it home, maybe you'll meet somebody. There's a Yid in the shul, took it. He didn't even own a Lulav and Esrig. A Pashat Balshemski Yid, he shows up every morning and show. He didn't even have his own. He doesn't know which way's up. But he heard, I said it, so he took it. I'm in the office a half hour later. He said, I'm going down to the diner, going down whatever, to where he hangs out with his friend. I didn't even hear what he said. He came in marching into the office 45 minutes later, Rabbi, 13, simcha. So this is a thought that it relates directly to the idea of influencers, which is being empowered through this thing. And the Rebbe will help them that we should do our part, but we should do it with simcha, over tuv levav, to know the Rebbe feartunes, and we're seeing it. And the Rebbe will schlep us out, eventually cross the finish line. L'chaim.
L'chaim, shekayach. Reb Shalom Moshe, du brennst Rebbe. You burn all the time with iskashlus to the Rebbe. And the reality is, tut alts was kent is a very, very difficult task, and we need a lot of kayach. And one of the only ways to get such kayach is through iskashlus to the Rebbe. And so this year on Yud Aleph Nisan, there was an initiative by many Chassidim to, again, amongst Chassidim, to sign once again a Ksav Iskashlus, as was done in Yud Shvat, Tavshin Yud, through Tavshin Yud Aleph. So anyone who hasn't yet had the opportunity or had the chance to consider it, take a look at unitedfortherebbe.com and take a look at the Ksav Iskashlus to submit ourselves once again to the Rebbe, not so that we can give the job back to the Rebbe, but so that we can have kayach through our Iskashlus to do what the Rebbe demands from us to do. At this point, we are going to watch a video that it's a powerful, powerful message that the Rebbe gives to a balabas during one of the Machane Yisrael events in Tavshin Memches on Dalet Tishrei.
Much success in all your endeavors, privately and also communally, especially about this thing that we are gathered all together.
I'd like to wish you and your family a happy, healthy, and sweet new year. I want to personally thank you for the blessings you sent on behalf of my family. And I want to thank Lubavitch for the Hasidic discourses and the Buddhic Devarim, which have had a great effect on me this year.
The God might bless you to use it all in good health and deep blessing also surroundings around you in the same way, and by showing you living example. And don't be afraid. It is a too big task. It is in your power to fulfill it. To influence all the Jewish people, it is a big task. But nevertheless, every Jew has the power to do so, because he is going with the help and blessing of God Almighty himself.
Well, I promise I'll do my best.
Yeah, God Almighty will help you.
So we just saw the Rebbe telling us each one of us can be an influencer. Don't worry that it might be too big a task. The Eibishter gives us kayach, the Rebbe gives us kayach. If you haven't yet, please go to the One Mitzvah campaign, open an account, take a look at the incredible resource and the opportunities it opens for you. It's a very easy 1, 2, 3 step to open an account. Send out a link to your friends, your acquaintances. Don't leave it only to shluchim, because as the Rebbe said many times, every yid is a shliach. And the resource makes the job easy because it does the work for you. They will turn around and they will come back to the site and they will find their way through. Someone who personifies the idea that there's no reason to fear a big task because we really have big keiches is our next Farbrengen. Rabbi Ephraim Mintz, director of the Jewish Learning Institute, literally has changed the entire canvas of shlichus and has empowered shluchim around the world to einem and develop to conquer and capture the entire world through learning Torah. When I first went out on shlichus, I remember asking Rabbi Ephraim about the idea that was proposed to me to go out and be a shliach that was exclusively dedicated to adult education. I don't know if you remember this, Rabbi Ephraim, all those years back, you said to me, there is no such animal. Every shliach who goes out to just teach Torah finds himself busy with other things. Today, the entire world has changed thanks to the initiative and the efforts and the unceasing keiches that you've invested with all of the incredible writers and workers and staff that you've assembled at JLI. And so we're looking forward to being inspired by your highly inspiring words. Rabbi Ephraim.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Gurkov, Rabbi Shalom Moshe, and all fellow Chassidim for this incredible historic Farbrengen. L'chaim, l'chaim. The one of the central themes of this Farbrengen is how we are each influencers, how we are charged to rise above our individual self and to be there for others, to sense a feeling, an achrayus, as chassidim, as the Rebbe's children, just as the Rebbe, Mahu, just as the Rebbe, his entire, the Rebbe, the ganze Rebbe, there for Am Yisrael, for Klal Yisrael. So we, as the Rebbe's children, likewise, are to be there for all of Yidden, to be influencers. When you think about it, this is l'chayra, not something new. We all know that every single chassid we have in our DNA, this is something that we each have. From kindvais on, we're raised, we're educated, we're trained to sense another Yid. Every single chassid, whether we have this title or that title, shliach, not shliach, every single chassid senses that enormous gift that the Rebbe gives us to feel another Yid. With traveling on a plane, which chassid didn't think about asking another Yid to put on film? Whether we ask them or not, Lepoiler, Shalom Moshe just mentioned, Amo frek ben yeah, Amo nicht, but the hergish, that sense, we all have it, it's in our DNA. It's in the nefesh of every chassid. So what then could Chavches Nissen be? What could it mean to us? What is expected of us to do now in addition to that natural disposition of every chassid? So I'd like to share, there's a sikha from the Rebbe in Tafshin Mem Gimel, Shabbos HaChodesh, where the Rebbe mentions that the old minig Yisrael was that when you want to count to see if we have a minyan, if we have 10 people for a minyan, so Rashi writes in Sefer HaPardes that the minig is to count the Yidden using the pasuk Va'ani b'roiv chazdecha, Va'ani b'roiv chazdecha avoy beisecha eshtach v'elehichal kodshecha b'irasecha. This pasuk has 10 words, and Rashi writes, and so has been the minig Yisrael to use this pasuk. However, the Rebbe says when you look in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch writes that when you want to count to see if we have a minyan, you should use the pasuk Hoshio es hamecha uvarich es nachalosecha. In fact, the Rebbe, why was the minig changed? Rashi in Sefer HaPardes writes something, and why was it changed? Ubefrat, the pasuk Va'ani b'roiv chazdecha avoy beisecha is more apropos for a minyan. Avoy beisecha, talking about a beis hakneses, a beis tefillah, ki beisi beis tefillah. Why does the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch give a different pasuk? And the Rebbe says in this sikha in Tafshin Mem Gimel that perhaps Yesh Loimar, says the Rebbe, since we're standing now, B'siyum Zman HaGolus, in the times of Ikfus the Meshicha, perhaps, says the Rebbe, the reason for this is when Yidden come together. A minyan kum zusammen, says the Rebbe, when is there a better time to turn to the Eibishter and plead, Hoshio es hamecha uvarich es nachalosecha, to ask, to plead for the Geula Shleima. Now, if we think about these two psukim, Va'ani b'roiv chazdecha and Hoshio es hamecha, we'll notice another difference between the two psukim. One pasuk is focused on the yochid. It's written in the singular. Va'ani b'roiv chazdecha, ovoy beisecha, eshtachava. It's about the relationship that a yid has as an individual with the Eibishter. When you look at the pasuk Hoshio es hamecha, there's not a single word in the pasuk that's lashon yochid, that's in the singular. The entire pasuk is Hoshio es hamecha. Uvarech es nachalosecha. It's lashon rabim, and it's not about us. We lose our individuality in this pasuk. We become submerged and included in amecha and nachalosecha. And perhaps herein lies one of the messages the Rebbe urges us keseder, especially in the sichas that followed Chavches Nissen, especially in the sicha Vayakel, but even in the Shabbos after Chavches Nissen. You know, there's a fascinating medrash which Rashi quotes on the pasuk concerning Avram Avinu, which I believe has a moedik ha'ira to us chassidim today, as we sit and Farbrengen and try to internalize this day of Chavches Nissen. The Eibishter tells Avram Avinu, Avram, you have nothing to worry about. Scharcha harbe me'oid. You have, Baruch Hashem, you're blessed. You have all the schar in the world. Avram Avinu responds, to the Eibishter, and he says, surprisingly, Matitinli v'anoichi hoyle chariri hein li lo nasata zora. I'm not happy with the schar that you gave me. Something's deeply bothering me. What is it that's bothering me? Ma toyeles b'chol asher titanli, Rashi says, citing the Medrash. V'hine ben beisi yoresh oisi Eliezer is about to take over. Ma toyeles b'chol asher. What toyeles do I have from Eliezer and all that you've given me? Rabbi say, stellt sich die Shaila. Eliezer Eved Avram was the most amazing shliach and chassid that Avram Avinu could have had. Eliezer gave his life, the Mesiras Nefesh, to Avram Avinu. Eliezer led the battles, the Mesiras Nefesh Mamish, against the Melachim. Not only Begashmis, the Ruchnis as well. We know what Chazal tell us, that Eliezer was doile umashke mitoiras rabbi la'achedim. He was a shliach par excellence. He taught Avram Sichis and Maimorim to the world. Sai went on Mesiras Nefesh. Sai he conveyed the Torah of Avram Avinu. What more could Avram Avinu ask for? Nevertheless, Avram Avinu says, Ma toyeles b'chol asher titali. Avram Avinu is saying that Eliezer, he has no value in Eliezer. How could Avram say that? What could Avram have meant when he dismissed Eliezer's Mesiras Nefesh, Eliezer's conviction, Eliezer's dedication? So based on a maimer of the Rebbe Rashab and Samach Vov, I heard from a Mashpia and some moedidik word that applies to us, every single one of us Chassidim today. One of the distinctions between a Eved and a Ben, a Eved is wholeheartedly dedicated to his master. Ad kedei Mesiras Nefesh, as was in the case of Eliezer. Completely dedicated. But an Eved does not care about other Avodim. He wants to do the mission of his Odoin, of his master, but he wants to be the one to do the mission. He doesn't want other Avodim because he doesn't care about other Avodim. He cares exclusively about his Rebbe, his master, his Odoin. A child, on the other hand, a Ben, of course, a Ben is Mekusher to his father, to his Odoin, to his master. But a Ben, a child, also cares deeply about his siblings. A child is also preoccupied with and concerned with the other Banim to the father, to the Odoin. Rabbi Sai, the message that Avram Avinu was saying to us in this parsha, which is so applicable to us, when we Farbrengen about the Sicha of Chavches Nissen, it's all about our relationship with the Rebbe. When we hear the words again and again, Ich hab alles getan und gib es immer zu euch, the words that ring in our ears, the incredible feelings that we had then and we have today, every time we listen to this Farbrengen, is about our deep relationship, the Rebbe's relationship with us and our relationship with the Rebbe. The Rebbe bet about ons. The Rebbe is pleading with us to do something, and we, every single one of us, as Chassidim, we want to be there for the Rebbe. We want to do that which the Rebbe wants from us. And the Rebbe is bothered. The Rebbe is saying, Ich hab alles getan, I need you. In this relationship of Rebbe and Chassid, most of our focus is on our relationship with the Rebbe. Our hiskashos, our learning the Rebbe's Torah, our being nischazik, strengthening ourselves, and all the things that the Rebbe urges us to do. However, the Rebbe, the message of Avram Avinu is, Avram Avinu tells the Eibishter, Ma toyeles b'chol asher titeli. What toyeles do I have when a chassid is mekusher to me but doesn't care about other chassidim? When a chassid is dedicated, but as Eliezer was, but he fails to think about others. Ma toyeles yeshli. What benefit do I have from such a chassid? Essentially, it's the Hayoim Yoim. The Hayoim Yoim of Chavches Nissen speaks to this theme, and the Hayoim Yoim of Ches Ov, Vos di Pe'ula from Chassidus and Yiras Shamayim, as es felt der Iker Avos Yisrael. What value, what good is Chassidus and Yiras Shamayim when the main quality is lacking, when we're not there for each other? I heard from Shliach Mechanech, so sein Gesund Rab Shmuel Lu, that a Chassid once approached the Frierdiker Rebbe And this chassid shared with the Frierdiker Rebbe something positive that another chassid did. He wanted to give the Frierdiker Rebbe nachas. He wanted to share a psura toiva with the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe looked at this chassid and repeated the following words several times. The Frierdiker Rebbe said, Zog im, zog im, zog im. Go and tell this chassid. Sometimes it's easier for us to tell the Rebbe a psura toiva than it is to tell a fellow chassid a good word. And this is the message. When we're talking about tut alts, alts is also speaking about tut alts was erkent us to be there for each other. There's no greater we know, and we farbrengen about it. But when we're farbrengen during this 24 hours of tut alts, imagine if we can each take upon ourselves this message of being an influencer, not because it's a job we have to do, but it's to who we are to be as chassidim, to be there for each other. Every time we're there for each other, we know that we are causing the Rebbe nachas ruach. The biggest hiskashrus that we can have to the Rebbe is when we're there for fellow Yidden, fellow chassidim. I know that a year ago, Chavches Nissen was the first historic Farbrengen, 24 hours from around the world, thousands of chassidim united. Yasher Kan HaMokim, so Abdankin Rab Shlomo Neparstak, who works Yom and Valayla with the team at 302, and Rab Moshe that's driving this whole initiative for chassidim and anash and shluchim around the world. After last year's Farbrengen, I know of a chassid. He was very inspired by the tumult of tut alts, and he took upon himself that every time he does something for another chassid, a favor, a toiva, he has on his phone a notes, and he writes down, he writes down any time he was there for another yid, another chassid. Not about his shlichus, his job, his avodas hakodesh. When he steps out of his individual space and he's there for someone else, he writes what he did, whatever it was that he did. And once a month, he would print out his notes from his phone, and he would take it to the Rebbe, take it to the oil. And he did this the entire year. And he called the file, he showed the tut alts. The file name was tut alts. And every day or a few times a week, he would try to find things that he did in the spirit of tut alts, because this is how he was stepping out of his own personal space and being there for another chassid. Rabbi Isai, imagine if the thousands of chassidim that are uniting tonight, if we can each resolve to step a little bit out of our individual space, out of our individual comfort zone, that we focus on our avodas hakodesh, our hiskashrus, all the things that we do and we're meant to do, and to grow in that area. But imagine if we could step over and start focusing more and more in an area where the Rebbe says that this is where we're starting to live in Yemos HaMashiach. This is where we're Isha Esre'eyu Ya'azoyru, when we will all be that Achdus Hashem will be expressed in the Achdus of Yidden of Chassidim. We all know the famous story of the Mashpir Reb Michal der Alter. He was once davening with Chassidim in Lubavitch, and suddenly, in middle of Birchas Kriyas Shema, as the yeshiva was davening, a Yid walks into the Beis Medrash, to the Zal, and this Yid was a shoemaker. He repaired shoes. And suddenly Reb Michal jumps out of his chair, middle of davening, in the middle of Birchas Krishma. And he goes over to the shoemaker and he points to a Tamim, to a Bacher, Reb David Hardakir, when G'dolei Atmimim in Lubavitch. And he points to his shoes and he says, and he doesn't say, but he motions to the shoemaker, to the shoe repair person, to please have in mind to repair the shoes of the Bacher David Hardakir. After davening, they approached Reb Michal Mashpia and they said, in the middle of Birchas Kriyas Shema, in the middle of Shema, you're worried about someone's shoes? So Reb Michal der Alter responded and said, what do you think Hashem Echad is? If we don't feel the pain of another Bacher's shoes that's torn, something is wrong with our Hashem Echad. The Sfas Emes says a similar word. The Gemara says in Brachos that we shouldn't recite Meimosai Korna Shema B'Shachris. Different opinions when we could say Kriyas Shema in the morning. Achedim Oimrim, the Gemara says, one opinion is
Mishayire es chaveiroi rochig dalid amis v'yakirenu. When we could recognize another Yid within our dalid amis, and we could acknowledge his presence and recognize him, that's when we could say Shema. That's when we could say Hashem Echad. Zogdas Vasemes, that before we declare Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, we have to recognize another Yid, and then we could go ahead and say Hashem Echad. Rabbi Sai, when we talk about, when Farbrengen about Tut Alts, if there's one area, in addition to all the Divrei Hisoyrus and the Hachlotas that were taken, that will be taken during these 24 hours, during this historic Farbrengen, if we could each find one area, and I'm speaking to myself and to all the Am Yaneiche Yeshavis, all of us together, to find one thing that we could do on a regular basis to seek ways that we could step out of our zone. And this is tut alts, not for ourselves, even in the areas of Avodas HaKodesh, our jobs, our shlichusim, but imagine the verfleitzung of toivis and brachas and yeshuas that it will bring about, and the Rebbe urges us to do. And this is what, among the many things that are being done, the onemitzvah.org is a very user-friendly system that was set up for this Farbrengen and during this Tkufa from Yid Aleph Nisan Me'eh Ve'esrim Shana, that allows us each to become an influencer, to be there for others, and we're being urged, all of us, we could create a personal link on this one mitzvah platform and to try to encourage ourselves and others to partake. I want to conclude with a word from a sicha from the Frierdiker Rebbe, which the Frierdiker Rebbe actually said, Tofresh Tzadik, here in New York on Brooklyn Avenue. Frierdiker Rebbe was here for a lengthy period during 1930, 1929, Tofresh Tzadik. And during Simchas Torah is a sicha, a lengthy sicha, which is printed in Kutei Deburim, as well in Sefer HaSichas now. And the Frierdiker Rebbe asks a question. We all know what the Baal Shem Tov says, that he went up l'mayla to Heichel HaMoshiach, and he asked Melech HaMoshiach, Eimosi kosi mar, when is Moshiach coming? And Moshiach answered, L'chsheyafutzu my nesecha chutza. The Frierdiker Rebbe asked the question, what could the Baal Shem Tov be asking Moshiach? It's like Meferish Gemara, says the Frierdiker Rebbe. We know that the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, Rabbi Shua ben Levi once met Eliyahu Hanavi, and he asked Eliyahu Hanavi, how can I meet with Moshiach? And he asked, and he showed him how to reach. He gave him directions, so to say, how to reach the chamber of Moshiach. And he finally reached Apischa Deroim, he came, and he asked Melech HaMoshiach, he asked Moshiach, Eimose Osimar, the very same question that the Baal Shem Tov asked, when is Moshiach coming? And Moshiach famously answered Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Hayoim, I'm coming today. Can you imagine the joy of Rabbi Shua ben Levi upon hearing that Moshiach is actually coming today? He comes back, he goes back to his home, and he meets Eliyahu Hanavi again. And he tells him, "Nu, was geschehen? What happened? You met Moshiach. What happened?" Rabbi Shua ben Levi says, "Shekurir komishaker bi. I was not told the truth by Moshiach. The Omarli, he told me, Hayoim asina, I'm coming today. V'lo asa, and Moshiach never came." So he told him what he meant was Hayoim, he's coming today. In Bekoiloi Sishmo. If Klal Yisrael follows the word of Hashem, if we all behave properly in Bekoiloi Sishmo, then Hayoim, then he's going to come. That's the story the Gemara shares in Sanhedrin. Frag the Frierdiker Rebbe Shaila. Frierdiker Rebbe asks a question. Was given the Baal Shem Tov Shaila? What did the Baal Shem Tov ask? The Baal Shem Tov certainly knew the Gemara in Sanhedrin. He knew about the conversation that Rabbi Shua ben Levi had with Moshiach. He asked him the identical question, a Mosai Ko'osi Mar. And why is he asking the question again? And second of all, why did Moshiach give a different answer? The answer l'chayra was Hayoim Bekoilus Yishmo. So it's a lengthy sikha, but the Nukuda, and based on the sikha, I would like to share in the few minutes that I have remaining what the Frierdiker Rebbe says and what we can derive from that sikha. Frierdiker Rebbe says, the Baal Shem Tov comes l'mayla to Melech HaMashiach, and he says, Moshiach, when are you coming? I know the Gemara in Sanhedrin. When are you coming, Taka? So Moshiach says, you know when I'm coming. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin. I had this conversation many generations earlier with Rabbi Shua ben Levi. That's when I'm coming. When Klal Yisrael will behave properly, when they'll follow the ways of Torah and mitzvahs. That's when I'll come. So the Baal Shem Tov says to Mashiach, the way I see Yidden, the way I look at every single Yid around the world, every single Yid is B'koilis Yishmo. Every single Yid follows HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way the Baal Shem Tov, through the Heilige eyes of the Baal Shem Tov, every Yid is on the level of B'koilis Yishmo. Says Moshiach to the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. That's the way you look at every Yid. But other Yidden do not look at other Yidden like that. You see other Yidden in that through those special lens. But fellow Yidden do not see Yidden the way you do. So therefore, Baal Shem Tov, when your lens become the lens of Klal Yisrael, when all Yidden will begin to see other Yidden the way you do, then Mashiach will come. It's based on the Frierdiker Rebbe Sikha. Rabbi Say, we know how much the Rebbe pleads with us, and especially during the weeks and the Sikhs during and after Chav Ches Nisan. The more we're able to see each other and the world through the Rebbe's eyes, through the Baal Shem Tov's eyes, through Mashiach's eyes, that's when Ka'asi Mar. And if there's one thing we can point to in addition to all the hachlatis that were said during this amazing Farbrengen, if we could each begin a little bit to live more in this spirit, we are certain that Ka'asi Mar. And as the Rebbe said in Chav Ches Nisan and in the Sikhs afterwards, the Rebbe is pleading with us to benkin zich for Mashiach. The Rebbe is pleading with us not to want Mashiach mipnei hatzivui. The Rebbe is urging us that we should have that sense of urgency the way the Rebbe does. And that sense of urgency applies to everything that we do. As Rabbi Gurkov mentioned, that beautiful liquid that was put together by a group of shluchim, where they show how everything that we do, from getting up in the morning, to how we eat, to how we conduct our business affairs, to how we are as parents, how we are as spouses, how we learn Torah, how we're Mekayim mitzvahs. The book is a must for every chassid. It shapes our understanding to truly be in a state of yearning for Mashiach. Rabbi Say, let's resolve together to rise above our individual selves and demonstrate to the world what the world already knows, that Chassidei Chabad are an extension of the Rebbe. And the same way the world is slowly and lately beginning to recognize and embrace the Rebbe as the Rebbe of Klal Yisrael, we have the tremendous chus and achrayus to walk that walk and talk that talk and be the eyes and the mouthpiece of the Rebbe. And because of Mamish, we should be zoicha to ka'asi mar, to be zoicha all together. Chassidim ein mishpacha. And when the world recognizes that we are ein mishpacha, they will want to be part of this mishpacha. And as the Rebbe said, eventually, sof kol sof, eventually everyone would be anash. As the Rebbe once said, Allah Yidden, all Yidden, wherever they are, and whatever their shittus may be, will be part of this growing family, which will together welcome Ka'asi Mar b'meheira v'yameinu mamish l'chaim.
L'chaim v'livracha Reb Ephraim. Thank you so much for those rousing words of inspiration, the Divrei Hisaydudus, the incredible Sikha, the Sfas Emes, and the insight about Eliezer Eved Avraham. This was so special. Many of us, if not all of us, have learned the Sikha, where the Rebbe explains why Moshe Rabbeinu was so worried when he heard that Yidden were fighting with each other, and he said, "Ache noida hadavar And Rashi explains that it's impossible for the Geula to come if Yidden are not the Achdus. In that Sikha, it's not in the Mugadika Sikha and Lakota Sikhas, but if you look at the Anacha, the Rebbe specifies that the reason that the Rabbeim, all the Rabbeim, were so passionate and spoke so frequently about Ahavas Yisrael is because this is the only way to bring the Geula. So Agresia Shekayach Rebbe Ephraim, we're now going to have the opportunity to watch a clip from a video of a Sikha in Tafshin Yud Zayin on Chol HaMoed Sukkos, where the Rebbe tells us that none of us have the luxury to step aside and say, let someone else take over and do the job. It's a responsibility and a privilege that lies with each and every one of us.
Und auch das ist sicher Hero bei Yameinu Eilo. Sie sagt, da sehen was trachten sich, als Ani es Nafshi Hitzauti. Wie bald Azem stirbt mir nicht und kann sitzen und lernen Teru und kein sein Mitzvahs. I was ist den Afkinine wie a zweiter Ried 40 Huf. Sie ist mit keinem der Amach Mitzvahs Sesse und sie ist Schemer, der Shassam Mitzvahs Leisesse. Sie geht weg seine Kirches mit seinen Unionen dem Ebersten. Oder geht weg zu Pari Melech Mitzrayim, auf Buim in Yonim Gashmi, mit Spießen des Ramses. Was der Tewe von Gashmi ist, das hat nicht keine Schome, kein Ruchnis, was belebt ist. Ist auch das Demut, wie sagt im Medrash, Aloma Nikra Shmei Pisei, als not Gebet u Pite Heim Beilei. ולמה נקרא שמי רמסיס, המהוד גבוית ונסמסניס ונסרמסיס, אז עוד כנקיומנית, אידוס דמות קונדר נתמצו זן זיך עלי נכד, הסלבס כל ישראל הרבין, זה בזה. Und hat so gesagt, auf der Ruf der Rebbe der Schwer, als in der Pshat von Ahavas Yisrael, ist das nicht gemeint, Jiden, was kennt sich mit dem und hat sich mit dem befreundet, nur das meint man auch viele Jiden, was gefühlt sich bekannt wie Tevel und ist sich mit dem keinmal nicht zusammengetroffen, ist auch ferne der Mitzvah von Ahavas Yisrael und nicht Ahavas Stam und Ahava Behagbole, nur sie darf sein, der Komecho, Punkt als wie sich hat sich lieb, on mit Dides und non Agbolis, hat darf sein der Linie von Ahavas Yisrael auf der Zweiten. Und in was besteht, hat die Ahava ist, hat wie bald ist lechulis sich leisecher, gefindt sich bei Yolo shel Tera und bei Yolo shel Mitzvah, is in der Linie von Teira Mitzvah sein nechet alle Jiden Arevin Zeh, sie können sein der Limud der Teira Bishleimus und der Kiyama Mitzvah Bishleimus, Bishas Achilek von dem, was Kol Yisrael Kulam Yachad is a Chakema Shleimo, is a der Chilek Leisator Nita Risholim Belimud der Teira und Bikiyama Mitzvah. Und unter dem Linien Montnen bei uns selber viele beherrgisch hat man das nicht. Ist der meiste Befehl soll das Areis und das soll sein verbunden mit allen Jiden, wo sie sollen sich nicht gefunden. Und das Ajine, was wir können ablegen auf übermorgen und auf morgen und auf eine Herre Feier später, waren mit Tono Idea Admo, sie kann sein, dass oder der Herr Fein, was machlich sein. Als bei dieser Rede geht man ein Reis von dem Golus Koffel Kuppel, wie Gehula Schleima Vahamitis oder Rachmonel Islam auf der Heper.
So Rebbe Ephraim talked to us about Ahavas Yisrael. Reb Simon Farbrengen about the need to overcome apathy. In the Sikha we just saw, the Rebbe said that even if we don't feel the Avos Yisrael, we're somewhat apathetic. Nevertheless, it's important for us to recognize that if there is a Yid who's not doing a mitzvah he could be doing, something is lacking in us. So please, each one of us, let's go and click on the link and create an account and ensure that every Yid in our circle of acquaintances and beyond does another mitzvah. I once heard a story that there was a shaita, a fool. He was standing and trying to measure a beam, but he couldn't reach the top of the beam. It was too high. He found a ladder. The ladder didn't reach. He built a pyramid. The pyramid didn't reach. Along came a chacham, an iber chacham, someone who was too wise for his own boots. And he says to him, how about you lay the beam down on the ground and then you'll be able to measure. So the shaita says to the chacham, thank you very much. I wasn't trying to measure length. I was trying to measure height. This has been a very, very long Farbrengen. And we're now entering the home stretch, but it's not a long Farbrengen, it's a high Farbrengen. As the Rebbe said on several occasions, we want Moshiach to come in a manner of achishena, quickly, now. But the truth is, the longer it takes, the higher an experience of Moshiach we will have. So we are satisfied with Moshiach coming today, but we still haven't reached the height that this Farbrengen is capable of reaching. And so at this point, I hand it over to my dear Chaver, Choshev Shliach from Mequon in Wisconsin, Reb Moshe Rappaport.